Now here we're going to be discussing the evaluation of subsidies, and we're going to be discussing them in the form of whether or not they're effective, who benefits from these subsidies, does anyone benefit, is there a large opportunity cost, or we're going to be discussing whether or not it actually solves the market failure, and then we're going to be discussing whether or not it's efficient. Okay, so just starting off with, is it effective? Is the commenting on the fact that are these subsidies effective? So if you get a question on the effectiveness of subsidies, you can evaluate by saying yes, significantly yes, in terms of how much by the magnitude of it. This commenting on those is great. So for example, let's just have a look. So is it enough to incentivize producers and consumers to increase production and consumption respectively? Now, let's use an example here. So electric vehicle subsidies. I mean, if you're in 2020, we're probably looking at kind of the electric vehicle revolution. And we can see that in the share prices of a lot of these electric vehicle companies, such as in China, in the US, and so forth. Now, in the UK, the maximum grant available for electric vehicle cars is £3,000. So this is to help move the increase the supply of electric vehicles and to make demand more affordable. Okay, so it reduces the price and so forth. So to be eligible for the grant, cars must cost less than £50,000. Okay, this is the recommended retail price, including VAT and delivery fees. The grant will pay for up to 35% of the purchase price, up to that £3,000. Now, I don't know about you guys, but have you seen what type of electric vehicles we have? We're literally looking at Tesla. Now, Teslas start in the UK around £35,000. Now, that's fine. Okay, so £3,000 off, great. So that's around, well, we're talking about 8-9% here, aren't we? So it's not a lot in terms of grant or subsidy. So also the affordability of these cars as well. So on top of that, you're going to be financing the goods, and on top of that, you're going to be getting a grant of £3,000. Now, it sounds still very expensive because most people, number one, buy second-hand cars. Number two, they finance second-hand cars. But the £3,000 off a Tesla, which is $35,000. Now, that's just one of them. If you're talking about the BMW, you're talking about the i3, if you're talking about the Nissan Leaf, which these are meant to hit the more affordable range, I mean, you're still looking at around 25,000. Okay, so £3,000 off, again, it's still maximum 10%, 11% off the retail price of them all. So it's like a 10% discount. So is that in, I mean, when a shop or a company provides a 10% discount, it doesn't really excite you, does it? It doesn't incentivize producers to be like, look, come on, let's increase subsidies. Let's increase production. So you have to comment on whether or not this is going to be seriously effective. Now, for electric vehicles, the alternative motive for people buying cars is the fact that it's, number one, it saves costs. Number two, the demand is trending that way to have more responsible cars. So no petrol or diesel cars. Number three, we're banning them anyway. And number four, it's becoming a lot more accessible. So when we go through, when you go through the application video, you would have noticed or will notice that the number of charging stations has been increasing kind of exponentially for the last 10 years or so. So there are other reasons to why electric vehicle sales might be going up rather than just the subsidies. This is probably just a nice little bonus. And it's just kind of the icing on the cake. Okay, so just commenting on that is key for your evaluation. Now, secondly, who is benefiting from these subsidies? Does it just cost the taxpayer money? Or is it actually someone benefiting? Now, do the producers just benefit? Do they just take on the additional revenue, just not pass on those additional cost savings onto the consumer? Are they just taking that grant money onto themselves. So for example, if you're thinking of if you remember in August, we had something called in August 2020. So if you're watching this video from 2022, during the coronavirus period, we had an Eat Out to Help Out scheme. Go check it out. And basically, this is where the government was guaranteeing 50% subsidies and grants for every single meal that was had on a Monday to Wednesday basis if you ate out at restaurants. And what happened? A lot of restaurants decided to hike up their prices. So what they were doing was they were taking advantage of the naivety of the UK government, because no government's going to have officials patrolling every single restaurant, making sure that they haven't hiked up their prices. So the important thing to mention here and comment on is where is the benefit tending towards? Is it the producer or is it the consumer? Okay, so are the consumers getting that fair share of the grants? Was the Eat Out to Help Out scheme just a waste of money? Was it just a quick pump and dump with regards to the increasing the revenues of these restaurants? There's massive opportunity cost, because imagine at the same time theatres are closed. Now, this is one thing that really actually upset me, and it was the fact that the cultural industries were left behind. There were no bonus, there were no grants, there were no kind of tax breaks a lot of the time. There was no subsidies or anything close to what restaurants or the service sector or the hospitality sector or the retail sector was getting. And these are the kind of places that are going to be closed and with a lack of demand for years to come. So the opportunity cost on restaurants, for example, Eat Out to Help Out scheme, which costs close to, I think, about 700 million pounds for that month. And the opportunity cost was the fact that we have a culture and cultural arts industry in this country, which is responsible for around 22 billion pounds worth of GDP. And this is worth more than the car industry, by the way. And the opportunity cost of subsidizing one industry versus another industry, there are huge opportunity costs for that. So you have to comment on, if there's a scenario that presents itself with 2 or 3 different choices, then you have to then explain it and comment on it. Number 3, does it solve the market failure it was set out to do? So are more people buying electric vehicles and less diesel vehicles, for example? Yes, massively. So if you look at the diagram for diesel vehicles, it's trickling down. And if you're looking at the electric vehicle industry, my gosh, 184% addition to the sales from September 2020 back to September 2019. So nearly triple the amount of increase than there was previously. Grants available for onshore and offshore winds. The onshore and offshore wind farms produce 14.8% of all electricity consumed by UK homes and businesses in 2017. Now, what that's doing is, for some strange reason, the UK government stopped subsidies for the last few years in this section of renewable resources. And only in March 2020 did they renew their interest in providing subsidies for onshore renewable wind energy. So if you're providing these subsidies for cars and wind and solar power, it is resolving the market failure. And that market failure is greenhouse gases and carbon emissions. And if it's not resolving it completely, what it's doing is it's reducing the negative externalities that are arising from the concerns coming out of petrol, diesel, oil, etc. that we've had for the last 100 years or so. So commenting on whether or not it's actually solved the problem is by far one of the most important evaluative points you can make. Now, another evaluation point, you'll see this in a lot of my videos. Is it efficient? The efficiency aspect of everything is important. And when you comment on it, it's a high grade level of analysis and evaluation. As soon as you comment on whether something is allocatively efficient, productively efficient, and dynamically efficient, then you're winning. And if you can talk about it in detail like we do in our videos, then it's ever so important. So if companies are consistently receiving subsidies and grants, do they have the incentive to be dynamically efficient or productively efficient? Are they there sitting there with their hands behind their head, relaxing? Or are they working really hard to make sure that those subsidies are put to good use in reinvesting into potentially research and development? Because if they become dependent on this money, they don't learn how to survive or adapt without it, they're not going to reinvest this money. And the only way to overcome dependency on these subsidies is by basically imagining it's not there, and therefore utilizing the newly found funds from the research and innovation that you've created and reinvest that. And essentially just reject those subsidies. But most companies don't do that. If we look at farms, for example, we've had the same farmers in terms of the same production aspects. The level of the lack of technology in farming over the last few decades is considerable. We've had the same combine harvesters. We've had the same problems with irrigation. We've had the same issues with regards to the use of pesticides and so forth. So over the last few decades, we've had very little investment into farming technology. And that's because of the use of subsidies from the EU in making sure that farmers are getting their just desserts in terms of payment and prices. And also the fact that we're maintaining supply constantly so that we don't have food shortages. And because these farmers are receiving basically donations and grants through the Common Agricultural Policy, the level of technology or the innovation that should occur in farming isn't occurring, and thus results in a lack of dynamic and productive efficiency. Okay, so it's just important to communicate that across to the examiner. So are they making the efficiency gains in the speed and manner in which it needs to occur? Or are they just taking the subsidies on board and making sure nothing's happening? There was a famous, famous news article about Jeremy Clarkson, the old presenter of Top Gear. And he gets paid. He owns vast amounts of land. And because it's farming land, the government actually pay him to not produce anything on there, to make sure that prices maintain high. They don't want him converting his land into farming land. So they pay him a subsidy to not use it, basically. To the amount to the tune of kind of the revenue that he may have made with regards to that land or farming. Okay, and these are the kind of wasted resources that we're talking about. And finally, are subsidies actually leading to external benefits? So childcare, one of my favorite kind of intricate policies of government is the fact that they pay for childcare up to 30 hours as it stands. And this allows parents to work. This allows parents to go about their daily job. If they want to break from their kids, then from their babies, etc., that's fine. They can work from home a lot easier as well if they have access to childcare. And what this does, it just creates further growth in the economy. So by providing these subsidies, it creates further externalities in production in terms of positive ones. So it's not just about just providing them because you should provide them. It's a matter of what else does it lead to? And you should never take that away. So when the governments took away the grants for wind farms, you're thinking, why? We're tending towards that. why are you reducing the subsidies available for electric vehicles? We don't need to do it. Maybe we should increase the subsidies just to speeden up the process in conversion to electric vehicle use and wind energy. Okay, so in terms of achieving government targets or macroeconomic objectives in the form of environmental sustainability, it's important that we have these subsidies, as you can see. And then if we don't need these subsidies, we can comment on the significance of them, the magnitude, the effectiveness, and whether or not it actually solves the problem. All right, so again, any questions on these evaluations, just ask in the comments.